I came across references to Greeley, Colorado's origins as the Union College and made a note of it years ago. And this time seemed to be the right time to make an effort to go to Greeley and see what was there. I did web research first, and that convinced me there was enough to see to make it worthwhile. There seemed to be several museums, 2 or more, and some other historic objects, and Greeley seemed to be proud of its past and making an effort to retain it. So it looked a lot more promising than Buxton in Iowa, but as I found, not nearly as well set up as Amana in Iowa. Nathan Meeker was the leader of the founding party, and there's much about Nathan Meeker, including this house that he built. You can see it's post-Civil War, so they got there after the Civil War, and I expect the name Union Colony in some way was an expression of adhesion to the cause of the United States. The Meeker House had a lot of information around it, including information boards, but it was not open. We were there at the end of the season, and we missed it by a week or 2. I couldn't be sure of that when I was reading the websites. I wasn't sure exactly of our travel dates and when we would get there, and so on and so forth. So we had to make the best of walking around the outside on a very fine but very crisp autumnal day. It paid to keep moving. Everywhere I go on these kind of exercises, I'm looking for the use of the word utopia or utopian, and even better if it's in a context where one might infer what the users of the term mean, either then, at the time the colony was founded, or those today who refer to it as utopian. So that explains some of the selectivity and the close-ups in some of the pictures that are in this episode. Horace Greeley is said to be the inspiring genius of this exercise, and hence the name Greeley, Colorado, is after him. He's famous for making popular that phrase, "Go west, young man," although he was always careful to note that he did not originate it. He thought it was, however, the right thing to say, and so he promoted it and popularized it, and it's now associated with his name. But he was always careful about attribution, as a journalist should be. Greeley also employed another journalist, Albert Brisbane, who was a great admirer and popularizer, translator, and editor of the works of Charles Fourier for the American audience. And I've wondered if Meeker and Brisbane were acquainted, and if so, if there's some line, however tenuous, from Greeley, Colorado, back through Meeker and Albert Brisbane to Charles Fourier. Here's some reference to the principles upon which the colony was founded: temperance, cooperation, agriculture, irrigation, education, family, and faith. So faith, not Fourier. Private property, well, that'd be all right with Fourier, but not with the other French socialists, of course. This was a nice museum, lots of intellectual content in the displays having to do with the history of the town of Greeley itself. There's Horace Greeley. And there was much else in the museum too, but this episode concentrates on that part. And that was a nice little exercise of evaluating the founding principles with current practice. About temperance, for example, well, alcohol is now freely available in Greeley, and no doubt many people are glad of that. But it was an attempt to make explicit some of the then and now comparisons. And the science of irrigation is much emphasized. There were references to utopia and utopian in the museum and its programs, and I tried to get snaps of those, but I haven't learned how to suppress the flash or get my shadow out of the way or something. So you can just barely see it there in the upper left that the term utopian is used. It's also used, by the way, in the phone book, and that was a picture of a page from the phone book earlier on that I did not comment on explicitly but passed by. And that's this little bit of aide memoire for my visit to Greeley, Colorado and the Union Colony.